National Federation of the Blind. Live the life you want.
So thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Karen Anderson, and I am the Education Programs Coordinator for the National Federation of the Blind. And of course, the National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day, we raise the expectations of blind people because low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. And we know that blind people can live the lives that we want, and blindness is not what has to hold us back. And so we've been doing these lessons every week. And today we are spotlighting one of my personal favorite tools in my toolbox. The Slate and Stylus is something that I learned to use when I was very small. I don't remember how old I was. But I ended up taking notes on it all through my college career because it's what worked best for me. And we've got several people with us who are going to teach us, give us some tips and tricks about the Slate and Stylus and give us some tips on how to get started. So Eric and Bree, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. It is a privilege to be here with you. I'm Eric Guillory, and I'm the Director of Youth Services at the Louisiana Center for the Blind and the President of a proud division of the National Federation of the Blind, the Professionals in Blindness Education Division. And I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Bree Osmond. Good morning, Bree.
Good morning, Eric.
You want to tell them a little bit about yourself?
So I am Bree Osmond, and I am the Braille instructor here at the Louisiana Center for the Blind.
Excellent. And our very competent videographer, the incomparable Crystal Guillory.
Hello.
Who may be chiming in as an excellent educator herself regarding the Slate and Stylus. So we're going to talk about various techniques for using the Slate, why we should use it, when we should use it, etc. But before we get into the actual use of the Slate, Bree, I have a question for you. I'm going to play contrarian this morning. You know, it's 2020, okay?
Yeah.
And the Slate, I mean, really, the Slate, with all the advances in technology that have happened, with us carrying computers around in our purses and our pockets, why in the world would we still want to use the Slate?
Well, but Eric, don't you realize that there's this pen and paper still existing in 2020?
Pen and paper, you say?
Yes. So the Slate and Stylus, for blind people, it's kind of like our pen and paper. It's something that's portable and something that we can grab real quick. Something that we can, just like our computers, we can carry a slate in our purse or pocket or backpack.
Excellent. But I have to ask our sighted team member here this morning, Crystal. Bree is saying that pen and paper still exists in 2020, but I know you are the calendar scheduler extraordinaire. Do you actually still use a pen and paper?
I use a pen and paper daily, numerous times a day.
Excellent. Okay. And that's our point, ladies and gentlemen, is that the Slate is vilified now or thought of as antique, but it's not. It's so portable, versatile. Bree, I remember, and I don't remember what year this was, probably 2012 or so. I remember a tweet from you all those years ago where, I'm paraphrasing, you said, my Braille note died and my laptop died in the same class. Thank goodness, though, I have my Slate and Stylus, so I'm ready to go. Something like that.
That's right, because unfortunately for I always carry a Slate and Stylus of some type with me, and technology is wonderful, but yes, sometimes it does fail us. So being able to have something that I can grab, at a moment's notice is so important. So even though my technology wasn't working, the class still continued on. And so I needed to be able to continue taking my notes and gathering the information that all the other students were getting at the same time. Because my technology wasn't working didn't mean that class stopped for me. So it was really important for me to have that responsibility of having all of my tools in my toolkit and being ready to go.
Excellent. Now, Bree, Karen talked about starting to learn the Slate when she was very young. When did you begin learning the Slate?
I learned the Slate when I was 5.
5, okay. And that's ahead of me. I started when I was about 7 or 8, and I'm very, very glad I did. I can remember being in the 6th grade, and we didn't have a whole lot of technology when I went to school in the 1830s. But we did have some technology. But I had a Perkins Brailler and some very rudimentary technologies, computer equipment. But neither the Perkins was working nor my technology was not accessible to me that day. But I still had the Slate. And I remember taking a test using that and being able to complete my multiple choice content, etc. So that breed that to my question. Okay, the Perkins Brailler. Everybody on this call probably knows what that is. Why can't we always just use a Perkins?
Well, the Perkins is about 10 pounds. And so I'm not sure about you, but I really don't want to carry that on my back every day. And with that, like with my Slate, I can just have it. It's right here in my hand.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. So, but Bree, isn't the Slate and Stylus, isn't the writing method backward? Isn't that what do we tell people? You're writing backwards. What do you say about that?
Well, when you're writing on the Slate, you're writing from right to left. So when you're slating, you are. Can I show it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to demonstrate with a peg slate here. So when you're writing on the Slate, you're going to write from right to left. So when you are thinking about this, on your right, you're going to have dots 1, 2, and 3, and then 4, 5, and 6. Instead of our regular left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so therefore, even though you're writing from right to left, the dot locations never change. So K is 1 and 3. K is still 1 and 3 when I turn it over.
Absolutely. So dot locations are so important. Can you talk about that a little bit, Bree? About the importance of learning what your dot locations are.
Yes. So knowing your dot locations is really important for when you're slating, or even when you're brailing, reading anything. And so that way, and having the order is so important. So I talked about K. K is 1 and 3. It's always going to be 1 and 3 on the Slate, no matter what, whether you're left or right, or reading from left to right, or anything that has to on the Slate. Even when you are writing, you may think about 1 and 3. You're not going to start on the left side and put 1 and 3.
Absolutely. And for parents and teachers, it's very important that we don't emphasize this whole it's backward thing to the kids at all. It's counterproductive, and it muddies the waters way more than it should. It's kind of like when students are learning the Nemeth code for Braille math and science notation. If you tell kids, hey, this is how we do math, a lot of times, anecdotally, what we found is kids, they're cool with it. They're like, okay. It's the adults sometimes. Today's my birthday. I'm feeling older some days, and so sometimes our old brains don't want to grasp that change. But kids are sponges and they're resilient, and so we don't want to get hung up on saying that we're writing backward. Now, KG, I forgot to ask you this question yesterday, but as someone who's involved with sewing and knitting, etc., I remember that back in the day for tracing sewing patterns, you would use the tracing wheels, and you had to trace in reverse. Correct? Is that still? Do you know if that still happens a lot?
I am not a seamstress, so I do not know.
Okay. Well,
but with knitting, it's just follow the pattern.
Right. But when you were exactly, but I remember we would use the tracing wheels to make tactile graphics on a screen, and you did it again, right to left. And again, when we did that, people didn't make a big fuss out of that. They understood that. And so it's the same concept with the Slate and Stylus. So
And it's the same concept like you were saying with Nemeth. Some teachers, when they're teaching Nemeth, they try to say, oh, it's like a CH sign. Well, don't even tell the kid that. Tell them it's a multiplication.
Exactly. We make it much more difficult than it needs to be. Before we get into Bree actually demonstrating various aspects of the Slate, can you talk about, Bree, the PEG Slate and what that is and why it's so useful?
100%. So the peg slate is a wonderful tool. So I'm going to so this is with the peg slate, it has 10 cells, and these 10 cells are slightly larger than regular Braille cells, and so it's really good for being able to fill it, with your fingers. It's good for dexterity. If you have littles who are trying to, they're learning how it all works, you can push this with your fingers, and it comes out on the other side. I'm pushing a couple of dots right now so that when I turn it over, you can see that I push some things down with my fingers. And so with this, you can start by teaching the Slate with something like this. And I even do this with some of my students sometimes. So I can lay it down and I can, if I wanted to write Eric, I can use my fingers, and I'm gonna make Eric here real quick. And so now I've written it from right to left. So I'm gonna turn my slate over, and
Other way.
yeah,
There you go.
okay. And so now I've written Eric.
Excellent. And I don't think we have one of these with us today, but the same concept can also be applied to something like the Papa cell, for those who are familiar with what that is. It's a Braille cell with 6 dots, and the cell can be pushed like that to pop in either direction, so that it's a good instructional model as well. So thank you for that, Bree.
Yeah, and one more quick thing about this too, even though we were just talking about it in terms of slating skills, you can even use this for just regular Braille skills. So even if you're starting on your left side here, and let's just say, okay, I want you to show me a D. Well, then you can push down what you don't need for a D. So I'm going to get rid of my 2, and I'm going to get rid of my 3 and my 6 here. So now I have a D showing right here on your left-hand side. And so there's lots and lots of different skills that you can use a peg slate for with littles.
Absolutely. KG, any comments on the peg slate?
No, and actually they're doing a really good job in the chat. A lot of the TVIs are talking out a lot of things that y'all are saying too, so you have a lot of involvement too.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that support and affirmation, and for your ideas. That's excellent. The National Federation of the Blind has a free Slate and Stylus program. We have a free White Cane program, and we also have a free Slate program. And Karen is going to provide additional information on how to find out more about that program as the lesson goes forward. But Bree, as you get into demonstrating how to use a slate, how to load the paper, etc., what is the most common slate that we find a lot of our students use?
So some of the most common slates that you're going to see is a 4-line 28-cell slate. And so this, a lot of kids might use. This is a plastic slate, and it has 4 lines on here. And then this is also a 4-line metal slate. So these are some of the most common slates that you will get. These are the slates that we send out from our free slate program and things like that as well. So these are the most common starting slates.
Perfect. Okay. So now one of the things that people get hung up on, and they think it's overly tricky. Again, practice makes perfect, as with any other skill set, and that is loading the paper into said 4-line slates. Can you take us through that process? There's a couple of different ways common ways that people like to do.
Sure. So the first way that I'm going to demonstrate is you can actually stand your slate up. So you'll have your slate.
The hinge on the left side.
Yes, you're going to have your hinge on your left side, and have the solid part of the slate facing you and the holes facing away from you. So it would essentially look like this. So I'm going to sit that down on the table here, and I'm standing the paper up in the slate until it touches the table. And I'm holding my left hand at the hinge of the slate, making sure that the paper is all the way to the hinge. And then I'm grabbing the slate, the front side of the slate with my right hand, and pulling it to the paper, and then I'm going to snap it.
That's all there is to it. And then as the student writes, though, eventually they're going to run out of room.
That's right. So on the slate, I'm going to turn it back around here. On the slate, there are little pegs on all 4 corners. So right now my paper is being held by these 4 pins. So when I run out of room, if I take my paper out, Mr. G,
yes, ma'am,
it has these pinholes on it.
Can I show it to him real quick?
Yeah.
Close up. So you can see the pinholes. Here you go, Bert.
Okay. So with my pinholes, I'm going to put the bottom pinholes of the paper on the top pegs of the slate. So now, when I close my slate again, it'll create 2 new pinholes at the bottom.
And the process repeats as you work your way down the page.
That's right, and it does. You can do this for all 25 lines of the paper.
Excellent, perfect. And there's the cool part about this too is 28 cells wide. So on a standard 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, there's still room if an educator or a parent wants to punch holes and bind the work as well.
100%. Now with that, I do recommend when you're loading your slate, making sure you have your ring holes on your right side and your hinge on your left side.
Yeah, that way you can actually bind the holes, you can bind the work in order. So absolutely.
100%.
Now there is another technique. I know this is not your preferred technique. The table technique, you are just lightning fast, and you're lightning fast at this other technique too, but can you take us through it?
Yeah, sure. So the other technique that you can use is you can actually leave your slate laying on the table like this, completely flat, and I've got it open, and I still got my hinge on my left side, and then I'm laying the paper down on the slate, and I am lining it up with the top of it, and then I'm going to close the slate, and I have done the same thing.
And the same paper progression applies, of course, as you slide the paper down the slate.
That is correct.
And it does take practice. Will your students sometimes, or will you, as you're trying to work with your students, sometimes load it crookedly? Yes, you will.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I still sometimes do. It happens. And that's, again, you don't say, well, lesson's done. We're just, it's part of the learning, just like you would with any other skill set. So that's how you load the slate. But when a student is first starting the slate, particularly thinking about school-age kids, what kinds of things do they need to start, and how best? Well, actually, before we even start that, you were going to talk about some of the different styluses.
I was going to say there's a lot of stuff going through the chat about some other types of stylus and slates.
Yeah,
so we definitely want to get to that too.
Absolutely, yes, indeed. So let's talk about the styli first.
All right, so there are lots of different types of styli. And I have 3 here to show. So this right here.
Yeah, they can see it.
Okay. This is often called the saddleback stylus. I have had a couple students who have called it the Y or the dog bone. But I think when you're buying it and things like that, it's most commonly called the saddleback. And then this is your standard wooden stylus. And this comes with lots of slates. I do see this all the time.
And it's kind of, can you describe it? It's kind of rounded at the top, and what's the differences?
So it's rounded all at the top here, and then there's a little flat side. So maybe a student wants to have the flat side against their finger or against their hand, is kind of up to them.
Okay.
And then lastly, I have a circle stylus. So this is just completely curvy and round. There's no flat anything except for the top of it. And some students really like this stylus too. So a lot of times I tell my students that all of these styluses do the same thing. It's whichever stylus is most comfortable for you or your student or whoever is learning how to use the slate is fine. So that way, they know, okay, we all have different size hands. And so me personally, I prefer the saddleback stylus. This is my favorite.
Can you show us how you hold that?
Sure. So now I'm left-handed. So,
okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I didn't
So
know that.
yes. So for me, I hold the stylus. The top of the stylus is on the front of my palm, and then I hold the bottom of it with my thumb and my middle finger, and my index finger is just kind of hanging out. Now, some people prefer to do it with their thumb and their index finger. So whatever is most comfortable.
And if you want to show them, like, even though you don't slate right-handed, if you want to show them how you would hold it in your right hand, I can.
Think I would do it the same way.
That way.
This is how I teach my students to do.
Some people are saying, yep, index and thumb, that's their favorite way. Another TVI mentioned that the stylus with the little flat stuff is great for students because it's not going to roll off the table.
Yeah.
So you put that flat part down. It's not going to go rolling like the rounded one.
That's right.
And are there any, before we talk about which content to kind of start with the slate and also the different types of slates, are there any questions in the chat that we need to address?
I don't think so. Mostly it's just talking. I'm just telling y'all topics they're talking about. We definitely need to go over the different types when y'all are ready.
Absolutely. So before we talk about the different types, though, we're going to talk about what, for littles especially, what's beneficial to start them on and do it.
100%. So, we talk a lot about when kids are starting to learn how to use the Braille, or how they're, starting with scribbling and things like that. And I think it's the same thing for the slate. So, they can, just learn about just pushing the dots. Maybe they're just, trying to at least get a dot in each cell. Maybe
to hear a pop is what we say a lot of
Yes.
times.
So we want to feel some pops. So I am just kind of taking myself into different cells, or maybe they just, so just hearing it, maybe experiencing it. So then also very early getting the orientation of the cell. So you can take your stylus and go around the cell. And I am making a noise here to emphasize the grooves in the cell. So they can think about it like the stylus is like their cane tip in the Braille cell right now.
Yes, I love that.
And so maybe they start with doing some full cells, so they know how to do all the way around the cell.
Yeah, the 4 sign, as some of you might call it, all
Right.
6 dots.
I cannot make this stuff. Okay. So sometimes one of the things too is that even though it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe they want to start by going 1, 2, 3, 6, 5, 4. So they're just going all the way around the cell.
And I think that verbalization for some kids could really help.
Yeah. Or they can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And even if even if they are going around the cell, even if they are going 1 through 6, whatever is, those are a couple of different ways that they can get started. So that's some of the early slating skills, or even just a row of C's. So maybe we want to work on getting them staying in the top part of the cell, 1 and 4, all the way across, or in the middle and the bottom. So there's lots of, I think, having that orientation of the cell is super important.
And I think too, I know this was a problem for some of my students and even for myself when I was younger. Sometimes we tend to get into the process and maybe let our slate kind of turn at an angle. So I'm thinking I'm writing 1, 4, but maybe I'm writing 1, 5 or something like that, because I'm not square with my slate anymore. It's turned. And I've seen that a lot. So just watching out for that.
Absolutely. And I always tell my students that, if you do not know where you are in the cell, find your way back to that top right-hand corner. So go back to number 1 if you need to, and then go back to whatever number you might be looking for.
Absolutely. You mentioned too some patterns that you get students to work through as they go through that early stuff that you just talked about. And then we advance maybe to something like what you're going to demonstrate or show here for the camera.
Yeah, so sometimes with patterns, so maybe they're, and I'm going to show you all some here in just a minute. So with patterns, maybe their age is working on patterns. So things like, maybe they're doing DE, or ABC, repeating things. Maybe a student's working on reversals. So maybe they need to work on O and OW on the slate, or and Y, R and W, E and I.
She's coming to take a look.
Coming to give you a close up.
And so with this pattern page that I set up here, and this is especially good for kids, there are spaces between each letter or contraction, so that way they can really get a good feel of what they're doing. And this is really good sometimes, even if they're just working on that writing from right to left on the slate. So yes, they know that R is 1, 2, 3, 5, but in their mind, maybe they keep thinking, oh, that's W, because they're thinking 5, 1, 2, 3. So sometimes, those types of things are very, very helpful. So, and if you don't mind, if I talk about one more thing.
Of course.
So sometimes, rather it be you as a teacher or the kids, or maybe some kids together doing some fun, maybe little slate races with, words or sentences, alphabets, patterns. I can maybe talk about a few other games a little bit later. But those are a lot of, a good tool to use with students, and something that I definitely did a lot when I was learning this slate. And so I think that those are really good ways to get some practice as well.
Yeah, and that can even be done through distance learning as well. So there's no reason to let distance stop us from using our slate and checking student work, or having a slate race partner, where they compete. Some students are all about that. So, all right, KG, is there anything in the chat that we need to address? Or
No, there is some discussion of littles, and Mary Noel offered that, with littles, they can pop bubbles like bubble wrap,
Yeah.
Yes.
to learn alignment and finger strength and that kind of stuff. So,
Yes, finger strength and dexterity are key to success with this. Playing with Play-Doh, right, and other just gross and fine motor strengthening of the hands and fingers. Either of you want to comment on that?
Well, I think sometimes, so that's where, even if, a kid is building dexterity or motor skills. So even if, let's just say they get a whole line, that's great progress. That's, and then maybe, their next goal, they get 2 lines. So I think, just, every step is important. So, no, a kid's not necessarily going to be slapping out a half a page, in the first week.
I think another thing to note, Bree, you and I were talking about this, is some children and even adults seem to think it's like a full body movement to use the Slate and Stylus. Do you want to talk on that, of like it being a wrist,
Yeah, so using the stylus is more so a wrist movement. And so sometimes when people are first learning the Slate, they almost think about it like a whole arm movement. And so their arms are all tensed up and their shoulders are hanging out and they're like, trying to push the stylus. So, but really the stylus is just a simple wrist motion. So when I'm slating, I'm going.
And can you slate a line of something? And we recognize that your students will not be at this speed right away, but Bree has been slating since she's 5, and even though she's barely 21 now, she
Whatever.
she's had a lot of practice. So and she can show you how she doesn't use a full arm movement at all.
And you can notice that Bree is using her right hand to keep track of which cell she's in.
Yeah, and back at the Schools for the Blind, I know people from the 50s and 60s said you could go into classrooms and hear popcorn popping. All the kids with their slates. That must have been pretty cool to hear a classroom full of slates.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Well, there's been lots of wondering, Bree, and thank you for demoing that, and for showing, because one quick thing before we talk about the types of slates, and KG, you may speak to this as well, because we're looking to strengthen student dexterity, hand and finger strength, etc. It may involve collaboration with PT, OT type folks.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. So just keeping that in mind as well. All right, Bree. So there's a lot of interest in the various types of slates. So
Yes.
you could take us through some of that
So
and their functions.
Yeah, so I am excited about this. So as I showed you guys earlier, this is a 4-line 28 cell metal slate, and this is the 4-line 28 cell plastic slate. So like I said, these are going to be the most common slates that you're going to see. Then we have this is a 4-line 28 cell. This is called a brown slate. And Eric, where can we get these at if someone's interested?
Have they been discontinued?
I can't remember if the brown slate is still for sale or not. The American Printing House for the Blind was a big purveyor of these, but they may have been. I know they rose a lot in price. But of course, we have our free slate program through the National Federation of the Blind. The Independence Market of the National Federation of the Blind also sells quite a few slates and paraphernalia in that regard. And the American Printing House for the Blind also sells a lot of different types of slates. The brown slate may or may not be still on the market, but it is one that some people like because, as Bree can show you, you can check your work as you go along. So again, I would not recommend this for beginning slaters though, because it does shift a little bit.
It does, and it opens on both sides. So like I opened the entire thing so that you can see that it's basically 3 parts. But if someone has slated and they want to turn it over, and it's also might be a little tough for littles to get open.
It
as
is.
well.
Yeah.
So, but now I could check my work if I wanted to.
And this used to be a favorite of mine a lot, even in college, because sometimes I would go to multiple classes per day, and I would maybe want to write down a due date or something like that in one class and double check it before I left the room and keep my slate loaded, and then just continue to move the paper down as I needed to. So for some people, the brown slate is helpful.
Oh, and that's the beauty of it. You don't have to move your slate.
Yes.
Yeah, to check your work. That's right.
To check your work. Yeah.
This is a 4-line 40 cell slate. And when I got this, I use it way more than I imagined. So this works with your 11.5 by 11 paper very well.
So that's for wider paper.
Yes. Then let's see. Well, let me get into that just a minute. Okay, so then this is a full page slate. This is also one of my personal favorites. This is the standard full page slates that we have here are 25 lines by 28 cells. I do not know where this came from. This slate I have had since I was 6 years old.
Really? Wow.
Yes. And
I have found them on Amazon, Brie.
This one?
Actually,
Okay.
yes.
This is 27 lines with 30 cells, and I love the 30 cells part of that. And even though it's 30 cells, I still am able to do hole punching and that kind of stuff with this. So this is a treasure here.
Absolutely.
But you can also get full page slates in various places. Now this right here, Crystal, would you mind to talk about this?
So it has a board on the back, and then it has a slate attached to it, and the wooden board has holes where you can move the slate down as you fill your 4 lines. So your paper stays on the board steady, and then as you fill your 4 lines, you just slide the slate down the board to fill the page.
And that's called a desktop slate.
Yes.
You don't see them in use as much anymore, but some students, KG, you mentioned having a student who that was definitely her preferred favorite.
Yes, she did. She loved it. She would actually slate essays in class on it, and it was definitely her favorite.
Now, a question for you, Brie, about the full page slate, and you may want to talk about this with other varieties as well, but how in the world does a student keep track of her place on a full page slate?
That was going to be my next thing. Because
okay.
actually you can do this with all slates. So
Yes.
that's what I was going to show
Okay,
that next in just a
perfect.
minute. So if you don't mind, we'll finish showing the
Of
slates
course.
real quick.
Yeah,
And
sure.
then all right, so 2 more that I brought down here. So this is a index card slate, and these are total gems. So this holds a 3 by 5, and it has 5 lines on this side, but if you turn it on over, it's got 6 lines on this side.
It's interpoint.
It's Interpoint.
Yes, it is Interpoint, and I brought some index cards here so I could just show y'all that.
These are one of my favorite types of slates.
Yeah.
It's the kind that I like to carry around because you can put a substantial amount of information into a small footprint, so that really helps.
Yep, and so I just slid an index card into this, and so when I'm done slating on it, pull it right out, there's my information. Now, one thing about these, and since kids are here, kids rock, so, but also part of school is that agenda. We have to, write down our homework, when things are due, that kind of stuff. And so, I don't know if kids today in school still have agendas, but we did when I was in school in, the 1930s, because, Eric went to school in the 1830s.
That's right.
Well, but anyway,
Back in the good old days.
so I had an index card notebook, and I had an index card slate, and so I would slide my slate onto the index card, and that's how I kept track of my assignments in middle school and high school, just like the other kids had to in their agendas. And so that was a great system. But even now as a teacher, I use my index card slate all the time. So
I find it's really helpful for like talking points when I have to
Yes.
give a speech or a lesson. It's really helpful to have my talking points, again, in a small profile right there in front of me.
or when I check my voicemail and I need to write something down.
You mentioned
Yeah.
something about that. So when you're checking voicemail, let's say there's a phone number you need to jot down or a security code for a Zoom lesson or whatever it is, you can do that a lot more quickly with your slate. And then if you do want to put it into your phone later, you can.
Yeah. So I can slate a phone number way faster than I can put it in my phone on the spot. And so there we go. This is a great slate. I can pull it out, I'm done.
Absolutely.
So, and also, since we're talking about the index card slate, I initially showed that with a index card, a regular one. But these right here, this is a Braille index card, and I guess we have these at APH. And I think we have some plastic cards at our Independence Market too, actually.
And you can buy maybe even, I guess if they still Office Depot or someplace, Amazon, you can buy overhead overlays probably still, even though the overhead projectors are out of style.
Yes. Oh,
AG,
yes.
I don't know if you've seen
Yes, those are awesome. So with
vellum
these,
type sheets, you know.
I
yeah.
think so.
So with these, they're more permanent. So even if like you need to write down information, some like maybe an email and a password, or a phone numbers, or that you need to keep, or maybe some kind of information that a student needs for school. Maybe they have login information they need. So these are really good for things that you definitely want to stay strong. And also, if something spills on you, you can wipe them off.
I was going to say, maybe you have a few notes about a recipe you're doing, just some bare necessities, and it doesn't matter if you get it wet.
Absolutely. Flour on it, breadcrumbs, it doesn't matter. One cool thing, this is for older folks maybe, but for login and password information, etc. Some people are worried about where they store their passwords in their home if they should ever get broken into, or something like that. Well, the odds of a burglar reading Braille are very slim. So this is a burglar-proof way of storing logins and passwords, etc.
Yes, and two more quick slates this show. This is also an index card slate. You can use this with 4x6 index cards. And the cool thing about this is it actually has Braille down the side of it for the line numbers for every line. So this is 9 lines, and it has Braille on the 2, 4, 6, and 8.
And they have little holes to put it in a notebook, like see on the side?
Does, yes, actually right here.
In a 3-ring binder or wherever.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
And then, lastly, it has a Q on it in Braille too. Lastly, this is a 1-line slate, and this leads me into kind of the next topic real quick too. So this is good for using Dymo tape, or if you just need to put a 1-line thing on the top of it. Like if you have a print paper and you want to label it, you can put this on it and say, okay,
Like
SA6 or bell ringers, whatever.
Absolutely.
So this is a really good tool too. So before I talk about the Dymo tape, I wanted to show you how you can keep track of some of where you are on your slate. So could you
You may hold it close. Are you good?
Right here. Okay. So on this slate, and this is on all the slates I have here, even on the full page slate, there are dots that are between the lines of cells. And so on most slates, these are on through every 5 cells. So if you move 2 dots, you've moved 10 cells. And so that's a good way of knowing if you have to stop. Okay, how many of these little dots have I hit already? 2, 3. Okay, cool. I'm on cell 16. I'm 1 cell past the 3rd thing here. Now this is 28 cells, as we talked about earlier. So these go all the way up to 25. My finger is at the 25th cell, and then of course I have 6, 7, and 8 on past this. So it is like that. We also have those dots here on the plastic slate that I showed you earlier that our kiddos might be using early on as well.
Absolutely.
And
So there could be some great spatial lessons too,
Yes.
When you're first learning it as well, getting them to figure out where they are.
And also just on the full page slate, you have a Braille line number on every other line on the even line. So 2 all the way to 26 on this slate, but 2 to 24 on some of our other full page slates as well.
And so like the concept of rows and columns for, and there's various ways to teach that, but for spreadsheets, tables, etc., the slate could help to reinforce that. I want you to write your name on line 4, starting in cell 16, or whatever the case is, and that could really help with some of that spatial awareness.
100%.
Excellent. What else do you have for us?
Okay, so a couple more things. I wanted to demonstrate the Dymo tape real quick. So I mentioned that, here we go. I mentioned that the Dymo tape is good for the 1-line slate. So is there a color difference on these? So like this?
Shiny.
Shiny.
Yeah.
So
like
the shiny
clear.
side, the shiny side is what needs to face down when you are going to slate with Dymo tape, because that's the actual label. The less shiny, more waxy feeling side needs to face up, because that's the part that you're going to peel off. So I am putting this Dymo tape.
Which is the part you peel off is typically white.
Okay, I am learning too.
Absolutely.
So I've got the Dymo tape in the slate now, and I could lay this down and make a label right now.
And we have labels, of course, for our microwave and other things around the house. There's just so many myriad uses for labels. So this is a great technique.
And Bree, did you have a slate that had the little slit to actually?
That was next.
Okay, thanks, Bree.
Yes. So this slate right here on the back side, this is most commonly found on metal slates. There are also lines for these on the full page slates, but they are not on the plastic slates. So there are rectangular slits on each end of the back side of the slate here. Now, let's see if I am talented enough to do it y'all's direction.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Not as you, not me.
I recommend that you load your tape from the hinge side of your slate because we want to maximize the use of our whole entire row of tape. So I'm going to put the tape in through this rectangle, and then now it's poking up this way. I'm going to pull it across, and down for a second, sorry. And I'm going to tuck it out that front rectangle. Now, I don't need a lot of excess out that front rectangle because that part of this, that is where the label is going to start. So now I've got it loaded on my slate here. So this is what it looks like on the back where I've got it loaded. That's all of the excess you need right here. And then I can now slate a label on the second line of my slate.
If it's on line 2.
Yes.
And then the excess was about, I would say, the size of a fingernail
Yes.
or so?
Yes. And then when I'm done making a label, I can just pull it out and cut it off with a pair of scissors.
Excellent.
Yeah, and we used this a lot before there was more standardization of Braille labels on doors, et cetera, as there is now. We used this to do a lot of labeling in different places when I was younger. So, and it just has so many uses. And again, it's portable.
Now, Eric. Well, I've got one more thing in store for us. But is there anything that you're thinking about that we didn't cover yet?
I think you've done a marvelous job, KG. Is there anything in the chat that we need to address?
No, the chat seems to be going pretty well. They're talking about where to get different slates, and Karen is moderating it well. I was going to say, you know, we started this, why use a slate, right? I mean, we have all these other technologies, and behind you, you have a backdrop of a bulletin board from one of our Bell Academies, and it says Braille goes everywhere, and it has many different index cards on it that our students contributed to crazy places that they would either have made Braille using whatever tool they've used, or they want to do Braille. So can y'all tell us about some places you have used the Slate and Stylus that people would think, oh, use the Slate and Stylus there? I almost think like a Dr. Seuss theme on a bus, in a, you know, or
Absolutely.
different things like that.
I mean, I have used it in a car. I have used it traveling afar, etc. Because there were times where I needed to jot something down on the fly, and I've used a slate on a plane.
Yep.
So absolutely.
Did you use it when you were singing?
No, because that hasn't been the case for a long time. But I absolutely, the portability of the slate is the thing I appreciate about it most, because it's helped me in so many different contexts, so many different places. Absolutely.
So even if you need to maybe jot down a quick list, a phone number, like I said, for students, assignments, and as a teacher, I have to write reports every month, so therefore I must take copious notes. And so, well, my computer is not at my seat where I teach, but my Slate and Stylus is right there, and I definitely, make sure to keep track of what my students are doing. The labeling that we talked about earlier is another good thing. And sometimes, let's just say some things that I've done in my life have really felt much better writing it down than doing it on the computer. So let's just say someone's doing a journal entry, or maybe an older student is doing a diary or whatever. So maybe they want to have their own, that's theirs. There's countless possibilities that you can use the slate for.
We talk about the use of the pen and paper, and we were saying a lot of that in jest, but it's so true. Even today in our digital world, we still hear how thoughtful, this is a handwritten note, because it took effort to make that happen. It wasn't just a quick like on a Facebook post or something. And so again, the same thing can be said of the slate.
Well, Eric, since you're my friend and it's your birthday, I slated you out a birthday card.
Oh, that's very, very thoughtful.
And
Thank you.
I made you on the front here, and
Uh-huh.
I slated you some little hearts, and I wrote "Happy Birthday" on it, and then open it up, and I put my notes to you down here on the bottom, just like a regular card.
And so how did you do that? I mean, how did you know where to put your paper, et cetera?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I went ahead.
I really appreciate that part. So can you kind of demo what you did?
Yeah, so I folded a paper in half, like I would.
Hamburger.
Yeah, hamburgers. Thank you. And let's see what I gotta do with this slate. So I wanted to make sure that I get things on the the front part of the card where you're gonna open it up at, and then on the inside of the card. So I actually started with the second half. I left this at the top and I put my slate here on the bottom. And that way when I would write, when I turned it over, this would be the front side of the card.
Excellent. So again, spatial awareness.
Yes.
You had to know what you were doing, and you planned it out before you actually did it. So,
I did, yes.
Excellent.
And then once I knew I wanted to write on the other side of, the inside of the card, again, I turned the paper over the opposite direction and wrote where put the text in. So it does take a little bit of practice and spatial awareness for that, for sure. It's one of those things that, especially once your students are gaining more slate skills and getting into some more advanced things, and that, that's a really good thing too. So one thing that I was going to say is that even for our little kids, there's still some room here on here. So if they wanted to, put any kind of decorations or draw or whatever, there's still plenty of room for that to happen as well.
Perfect.
And can I show them your pattern on the front
Yeah.
to make the hearts close so they can see it? See, she has a heart and then happy birthday and then a heart at the end. And all of this was done on the slate, right, Bree Brown?
Yep.
Yep.
Very awesome.
She used an S and an E and an I and a GH for the top part of the heart.
It's
And then
SEIWH,
WH, sorry.
and then GHAR, and then ENI at the bottom.
Yeah, that's just awesome. I sincerely appreciate it, and your ingenuity as well.
And that could, truthfully, thinking from a teacher aspect, that could really motivate students to move around their cell and do cool patterns, because they can literally draw with this slate too. And a lot of people don't think about that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I know of a couple of slate drawing masters. So
That's pretty cool.
yes. So those are some fun things that you can do too. So I, even though I teach adults, I have different games that I play with my students, and they really enjoy that too. And so the slate can be really a lot of fun, and while you're teaching it at the same time.
Yes, indeed. Well, ladies, is there anything else that we need to cover?
I don't know if Karen wants to open it up for questions or wants to wrap it up. Let us know, Karen.
Yeah, I think we can take a couple questions. I do see that Liz has her hand raised. Liz, if you have a question, go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Sometimes it takes a second to unmute.
Uh-huh.
Hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, so 2 questions. The first was, where can I get a nickel slate?
Thank you.
I heard someone in the chat was mentioning a nickel slate.
So that's made out of, the nickel. That's the one that Bree probably had with the Dymo tape slot in it. It's the one that we primarily give our students here at the center, and I know those are available through APH. I'm not sure if they are at the Independence Market, but definitely through APH.
Okay, and I've never seen a 9-line slate. Where would you get that?
That's a larger index card slate, and I don't know if they still sell those or not, Bree.
I think we do. A lot of times you're going to see there are 6-line 19 cell slates, and there are, I'd have to look for that one. I'm not 100% sure.
And you had the 9-line slate that you demoed.
Yes.
And that, I think if you're going to find it, though, it's probably going to also be at APH. If it's still
Be
in
what?
If it's still in the American Printing House for the Blind catalog,
Oh, okay.
that's where you're going to find it.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Anything else?
One question that I did see in the chat was a request for how you draw the heart. So we will try and put that up on our distance education resources webpage, which is nfb.org/resources/distance-education-resources. That link is also in the chat, and I'll put it up there one more time.
Awesome.
Yes, I will. I can write that down.
This is Liz.
Hey, Liz.
I couldn't type quick enough in the chat, but I have the instructions for the heart if anyone would like it.
So if you want to touch base with Karen, maybe.
Okay.
Yep, definitely touch base with me. Perfect.
All right. What's your email again?
So anyone who has questions or wants to reach out, you can reach out to me at Anderson, that's KANDERSON @nfb.org. And we'd love to hear from you. We would love to know what you thought of this session. We'd love to know what other sessions you would like us to do. We're doing these sessions to make sure that blind students and teachers of blind students and their families have the resources that they need to make things work in this time of online learning. So we want to make sure that the sessions that we are offering are working for you guys. So please send me an email, let us know what you'd like to see, or you can call me at 410-659-9314, extension 2243.
One more thing about the slate too
One
is that
other raised hand. Crystal, can you tell who that is?
Oh, let me see. Hold on. No, I can't tell.
Hang on just one second.
No, Bree, you were going to say something about the slate.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say we were demonstrating with Braille paper, but of course you can use cardstock, you can use construction paper. If you need to label something. A lot of times, as an adult, I need to label my printed paper, so I can put the slate on that real quick. So there's definitely a lot of possibilities there as well.
Absolutely.
So I see two raised hands. I see a raised hand from Eve, and I see one from Dominique. So hang on, Eve, we'll take you first. Let me unmute you. There you go, Eve. You should be good to go.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
We can.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, Guillories.
Hello.
So I was actually going to just share a comment for anybody who might not know before they go spend money on them. There's a little slide-in index card interpoint slate, and theoretically it's wonderful and it's great for brailing. But then once it's brailled on both sides, you can't get the card out. So don't spend your money on it.
You do have to be careful. Yeah, you do, because it can scrape the dots if you. Extracting it is interesting.
It's a finesse.
I don't always have it. I don't have finesse is not in my vocabulary.
That is interesting. A good point to note, because with your students, if they are using it, that might be part of a lesson too, sliding the card in and out, getting that,
Yeah, because if you are just slating on one side of the index card, it does just come right out.
It does. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
When you interpoint, it does get challenging. That's a good point. Interpoint. That's a good interpoint. Thank you, Eve. Absolutely.
Oops, it didn't work.
And Dominique, hang on just a second. There you go, Dominique. You should be unmuted.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're having a happy Friday.
It's Thursday, but we'll take it.
My gosh, I am, off on a day. So it's
Friday Eve, Dom. Friday Eve.
It is not Friday to me because I still have another work day. Anyway, I was always taught the school of thought that when you start someone off slating, you start them off with a dull stylus. So that way they get some, really firm Braille. And that way they're not tearing through their paper. And I really loved what Bree had to say about, making sure that you're just using the wrist movement. And that just got me to thinking about just, good Braille posture and having a relaxed movement and just using your wrist. But, sometimes I work with folks who have some additional hand problems, or just blindness isn't their only thing. And so is there ever a time where you find yourself going, I'm going to give a newbie a little bit sharper of a stylus, and and work with them on that, just because they need to build up some additional strength or coordination?
Yes, that's actually a really good thought, Dominique. So if you do want to sharpen a stylus and things like that, then I use a whetstone to sharpen a stylus, or you could probably also use like a knife sharpener.
That's WHET, whetstone.
Yes, a whetstone. And you will actually find the word wet in the McDuffie. So I am, let's see here. I have sharpened this stylus some. This one.
This one is sharper,
And I have not touched that one.
Okay, so this one, if I can find it. Hold on. There we go. That one has been sharpened. That one, there we go. Has not. I know it's still hard to see because there's a background.
Yeah, it's, even when I'm feeling it, it's, but so yeah, it is, and even when you sharpen, you don't even have to sharpen that much, because, and when you're sharpening, I would test as you do every rotation when you're sharpening, because if you get it too sharp, it will just make holes in your paper. But if you get it sharp enough, then you're rocking and rolling.
That's an excellent point, Dominique. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So it is, everybody's liking of their sharpness of their stylus is different. Some people like them really sharp. Some people like them, maybe some people do like their stylus dull as it comes, or in my own personal preference, I sharpen it just a little bit. So, because I do like my nice, pretty firm dots.
Because I have over sharpened a lot, and it's terrible because you get hung up in the dots, and they're overdone, if you will, and it's just not a pleasant slating experience for me at all.
And maybe as a teacher in the middle of a lesson, if you notice the student is struggling with the one you have, maybe that's when you do change your weight of paper for them to practice on.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, and there is there's also the lightweight Braille paper.
Mm-hmm. It's like 60-pound paper or something like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And whereas traditional is between 80 and 100 pounds, I think 80 is what we're seeing a lot now.
Yes.
But there is a thinner gauge paper that you can get, and certainly with stationery being available ubiquitously all over the internet, you can certainly find paper that they can use.
Absolutely. And I sometimes, for some of the things that I do, sometimes I grab a sketch pad, from the local store, and I use that for different things, because the paper in that is just as good if I want to keep a notebook or something. Or
and Chelsea mentioned earlier in the chat, guys, that you can from APH get the little notebooks that you can load into the Slate.
Yes.
Yeah, Bree, you were talking about those
spiral bound.
Yes.
My student mailed me her work on construction paper because she didn't have any Braille paper. So, she got creative.
Yep.
Exactly.
The other thing I wanted to tell you is I saw in the chat a lot earlier, someone asked about jumbo Braille, and they do make a jumbo Braille slate. Obviously, it's not mainstream, but it is an option.
Yes, it is. I actually do have that. I apologize, I don't have it down here with me. But there is the jumbo Braille slate is 4 lines, and it is 18 cells instead of 8 cells. 28 28 cells. And it is also a bit wider from the top, from the top to the bottom as well. So and it does also have the demo tape inserts. So those are, I have used those with some of my students who needed jumbo Braille. Maybe they have neuropathy or something like that. And so you can use those, of course, with regular paper. I also use those a lot with permabraille paper and various other things. So yeah, those are
those are a good resource when needed as well.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
The question I just saw in the chat was, do we think a jumbo slate would be good for a beginner? My experience has been
No.
that, yeah, I would suggest no. We want to get people started on standard Braille as quickly as possible so that their fingers get used to that. Bree or Eric, do you guys have any other thoughts before we wrap this one up?
100%.
I only use the jumbo Braille slate when I absolutely have to. And I really find that I only use that with people who are having, neuropathy, or maybe they have some kind of sensitivity issues in their fingers outside of your normal just getting used to it, or anything like that. So it's definitely a use it when I have to kind of thing.
Agreed.
Y'all have any other things you want to share?
No, we just appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the time.
Slates rock.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Braille
all so
rocks
much for
portably and in
joining us.
all other ways.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for joining us. Eric, thank you especially for joining us on your birthday. We appreciate the time. And we hope that everyone will join us next week for our next lesson. Stay tuned to find out what that is. If you are interested in getting on the list of to find out what our lessons are, you can email me at kanderson@nfb.org, and we'll make sure to get you added to that list. You can also follow us on Facebook by searching for National Federation of the Blind, and on Twitter by searching for @NFB_voice. And for those of you who are teachers, please join our Professionals in Blindness Education Facebook group. And if you are a parent of a blind child, we encourage you to join our National Organization of Parents of Blind Children Facebook group. Both of those are also divisions of the National Federation of the Blind, and we would love to have you become members. If you have suggestions for other lessons or webinars you'd like to see us do, again, please email me at kanderson@nfb.org, and we'll see what we can do to make them happen. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Connect with us. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at @NFB_voice. And like us on Facebook by searching for National Federation of the Blind. Visit our website at nfb.org or call us at 410-659-9314.